Good morning. Welcome back to the School of Shred. Gather round, folks. Gather round, gather round. Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome, welcome. This is episode 90 of the School of Shred, the one and only holistic health and fitness show where we connect the dots between the mental health, the spiritual health, and the physical health, because we're in pursuit of a better life when we want to get in shape, aren't we? I think we are. I think it's more than just abs and booty gains, as I've said before. It's more than a nice rack of abs, although that would be nice. It's more than toned arms, although that would be nice. That's one piece of it. A lot of times we want more production in our life. What if getting in shape was the key to you getting a 40-hour workday in 24? What if it was the key to you being able to play with your kids and have energy when you got home from work or got off of work, because most of us are working from home? What if it was the key? Well, that's what holistic health is. And so this is why we talk a lot about mindset. We talk a lot about spiritual health, listening to that inner voice inside of you, inner dialogue, learning how to tune in, not tune out, and learning how to manage life stressors. And that's what we're going to talk about today on episode 90 of the School of Shred. This episode is called Silent Stressors. We're going to talk about a few different forms of stress that humans are lucky enough to have, these humans. We're going to talk about these silent stressors, but we're going to talk about how stress can affect us and maybe some things that we can do to alleviate stress. And I'm going to give you what I think are the big three stressors in this. So you do not want to miss this. You want to stay to the end of this episode. Episode 90, let's run it. Silent stressors. The show's here Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. for your viewing and listening pleasure and your learning pleasure. Okay, classes every day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. That's Pacific time. That's on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, podcast app, and Spotify. As you guys jump on, throw a flex emoji in the comments. We already got them rolling. We got people waking the muscles up. This is the Monday wake up, baby. Okay, let's do this thing. So, silent stressors. There's two forms of stress. You have physiological stress and you have psychological stress. A lot of animals across the animal kingdom, from what we know of, they experience physiological stressors, right? The environment which they're in. Human beings, we're unique because we have thinking potential. We have minds. And so we can come up with all sorts of psychological stressors, which can make life very interesting at times. It can make life very painful at times. The psychological stress, our bodies don't really know a difference between physiological stress and psychological stress. For example, obviously that's a gross statement, but for example, work stress and a bear being in front of you ready to kill you and eat you for its dinner, your body doesn't really know the difference in that, right? The stress response is the same. We're going to talk about the hormones that elicit that response and how you might be silently stressing your body out and not even know it, whether it be through the two forms that we just listed, which is physiological stress, okay, environmental stressors, and then we have our psychological stress. All right. So let's get into physiological stressors here. So the first physiological stressors that might be silent to you, that you might not be thinking of, because we might think of stress, because stress kind of has a negative connotation to it. We think of stress as, oh, bad. We need a certain amount of stress. We need stress tolerance. Okay. But there is this gradient of enough and then too much. So as I start to say this stuff, keep an open mind. Don't pull back too much. If I start, saying something about the team in which you believe in, because we're all on teams. We ideologies, we get into teams. So the first one, physiological stressor, is exercise. I know you're listening to an exercise fitness show. Yeah, man, it's a stressor. There's a few different forms of exercise that can be stressors and maybe too stressful. And where we're going to look on this one is anaerobic activity. So we're looking at anaerobic cardio, so very high intensity cardio, and then high effort lifting. Notice how I said high effort lifting. So in my in-person practice, I have clients that we are not doing high effort lifting. We are doing lifting that keeps them underneath their tolerance threshold. So if we have this line, as I've explained this before, so you have a circle and there's a line through the middle of it. Underneath, on the bottom part of this circle, that's underneath this person's threshold, their stress tolerance. Over the line is above their stress threshold tolerance. If your main goal is hypertrophy, most people are going to try and nudge that tolerance up a little bit. That causes some soreness, but it can also put you at risk for injury. Underneath this threshold is not very high effort, but what it is doing is putting forces through the body. It's contracting muscles, but it's not terribly stressful where the body can't recover, depending on who the person is, what their goal is, what they have available, and things like that. So it all comes down to individual goal setting for that client. But as a general rule, very high effort lifting is very stressful on the body. That's a good thing if the body can handle it. Not so good if it's compounding with a bunch of these other stressors that we're going to talk about, okay? Because this is what we have to start looking at, is how many stressors are you feeding in, and then how many things are you doing to relax your body. So the second thing is going to be high caloric intake. So gorging yourself with calories, high caloric intake can cause inflammation. It can cause stress on the body, okay? Inflammatory foods can cause stress on the body, all right? So inflammatory foods might be masked as we might think that they are healthy. They might be healthy to most people. Or we realize that healthy is a relative term, because we might think that because a food is natural, earth-grown nutrition, which I'm a big fan of, we might think that everybody should be able to eat that. Everybody should be able to eat bananas. Everybody should be able to eat broccoli. Everybody should be able to eat, these foods that we think are healthy because they're on the team that we're on. It's not the case. If we have intestinal permeability, that is called leaky gut, where food is getting through the gut barrier into our bloodstream and it's causing an immune response and immune reaction every time we eat that food. That is not a healthy food for us. So if we have any type of inflammatory foods that our body just doesn't like and it sends out an immune response to, that's a stressor on the body. So that's another one. The next thing is going to be caffeine intake. So your afternoon pick-me-ups. Look, I know I love caffeine. Your afternoon pick-me-ups, your morning pick-me-ups, whatever. If you're stimulating caffeine throughout the day, specifically more towards the afternoon, you're spiking cortisol because that's what caffeine's doing. Caffeine is a stimulant. Stimulants activate the central nervous system's fight or flight response. You get decreased hunger. You get increased heart rate. Pupil dilation. You get revved up. You get charged up. And then the last one here, physiological stress that you can induce on yourself, is fasting. And fasting is great. We talk a lot about fasting. Fasting can be a good thing. Metabolic fasting, where you withhold food for a certain amount of time. However, if you're adding it into a bunch of other stressors, it might be an issue. So there's some silent stressors here and what I mean by silent is things that we might consider to be healthy, but we have to acknowledge them. We have to consider them. So the next thing we're going to get into now is physiological stressors. This is kind of a short list. I want to keep it simple for you. So psychological stressors. Psychological, in the mind, in the head. All right, you're in your mind. Is worry and anxiety. That's a physiological or psychological stressor. Okay, that causes a stress response. And we also have work stress. Okay, if you're stressed out at work, if you got to do 100 things today, boom, 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 you're always behind. That's stress. And then we have relationship stress. If you have toxic people in your life, if maybe your significant other and you are fighting, you're not doing good, that's another stressor. And so out of all these stressors that I just listed, between physiological and psychological, the big three that I've come up with that I see over and over with my clients is typically work stress, because that relates to finance. So there's some financial stressors. And then there's food stress from a poor diet, which is causing inflammation and causing a stress response. And then there's exercise stress. Okay. And so I'm going to draw you this picture now with my words. And this picture looks like somebody who gets maybe 6 hours of sleep a night. They wake up in the morning, they caffeinate themselves to get a good cortisol awakening response, which is not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. But then they go to work, and then they're at work, they're stressed out. They got all these deadlines. They got all these, meetings they got to be on. They're always behind. At lunch, they have some food that might be inflammatory, and then they caffeinate themselves when they get the mid-afternoon low. They get another stress response through the afternoon, and then they go home. Maybe they get in an argument with their significant other. Now they're stressed again. Then they go to the gym. They stress their body out. As you see right here, this is a day full of stressor. It's one stressor after another. Some of these stressors are silent stressors, like things we think are healthy, like maybe the food that we eat, but maybe it's causing an inflammatory response. Maybe caffeine, because caffeine can be good for us. Coffee is good for us. It's got antioxidants. Green tea's got good stuff in it for us. But if it's just another stressor, it might be silently hurting us. It might be silently hurting our health. And then we have getting into verbal disputes with people. That's going to cause issues. Then going to the gym and then lifting. That's a silent stressor right there. If you're exercising really hard, if you're trying to blow off steam. Now, blowing off steam, that's one of the best ways to do it is exercise. However, it is a stressor. These things compound. So if we're spending a lot of our time in this fight or flight state, that can be an issue, and it can start to cause some issues and cause something called HPA axis dysfunction. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about what does elevated stress do for a prolonged period of time. So you have some hormones that are associated with the stress response. You have cortisol. If you've ever heard of that, that's a stress responder. You have epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, and then norepinephrine, noradrenaline, if you want to call it that. And so these guys they're stress hormones. When we're stressed all the time, we are elevating cortisol and adrenaline. Okay, we're elevating it, and that increases blood pressure. Okay, because what we're doing is we're sending out adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Norepinephrine helps with blood pressure. And if we're elevating that, what we're doing is we're training our adrenal glands. Okay, we're training our adrenal glands. We are overtaxing our adrenals. Okay, which is not so good. We start to train these guys and we get high blood pressure from it. So a lot of times stress causes high blood pressure. I think you probably knew that, but how does it do that? It's because it's taxing the adrenals and it's training them to be stressed out. This is why things like meditation can be really powerful, because it can actually start to train your physiology to be calm and your psychology. Meditation does both of those things. That's a big point we talk about at the School of Shred is mindfulness and meditation. There's a whole spirit module on that. And this is pretty much from that module that we're talking right now. You're getting some training on. So you have that, cortisol, adrenaline is up, blood pressure goes up. You decrease your recovery and regeneration because you're decreasing your sleep quality. What happens is you start to elevate cortisol all the time, and epinephrine is you start to get into this place where it's hard to sleep at night. Maybe you're wired when you go to sleep, so you can't quite get to sleep. You don't get deep sleep. But then as you're awake, you're kind of always tired as well. So you end up in this no man's land where you're kind of like a zombie. This happens quite a bit with people who have this, they feel like they got insomnia or they just can't sleep at night. They kind of get wired before bed, and you start to train your circadian rhythm to where cortisol starts to get high at night, and then it starts to plummet in the morning when you need it. And so you're now messing up the circadian rhythm. So we want to be mindful of that. And then we're also, we're increasing inflammatory signals, cytokine production and things like that. When we're stressed out all the time, our body is fighting. It's fighting. It doesn't know what it's fighting, but it's fighting something, and you can cause systemic inflammation. This can cause leaky gut, and it can alter your gut flora. This is not a good thing here. It alters digestion. Digestion is where nutrition is assimilated. So there goes Instagram. So Instagram likes to shut down in the middle of these shows now for some reason. So good thing we got the main camera going here. So anyway, and then you have increases in blood glucose, and you get some insulin resistance that will happen if you're stressed out long term, because you're always elevating blood glucose levels when you're stressed out, because things like cortisol are up. They're releasing sugars into the blood. It's raising blood sugar. How does our body combat that? It releases insulin from the pancreas, and the pancreas has to shuttle it away in the muscles, the liver, and the adipose sites, the fat tissue. It starts to store it in the fat tissue. Our body starts to get resistant to insulin's effects. It's like most things. If we get high amounts of it, our body regulates, and it downregulates these receptors. So we become less efficient at insulin's, at the effects of insulin. Insulin is a very important hormone because it's the one hormone that helps us regulate high blood glucose readings. If it starts to If our receptors start to not take in its influence as much, we start to have high blood glucose readings. This can cause type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Stress can cause these things. We need to de-stress our lives. We need to be aware of too much stress. If you're stressed out today, hopefully you're not, but if you are, someday this week, maybe instead of doing a hard exercise session, maybe you go for a walk and you do an aerobic session. Respiration creates relaxation. Okay, so you still want to move your body. Exercise is still good, but what intensity of exercise is a good thing to ask, because it can be a silent stressor that's causing some issues. And what I mean is a silent stressor, I mean in a bad term. Stressor as in overtaxing your nervous system, causing fight or flight hormones to be elevated too much. Okay. And then even fasting. Fasting is going to be a stressor on your body. It can definitely help with inflammation. There's some, really great applications for metabolic fasting. But if it's another stressor and an already stressed out life, we might want to consider regular meal intervals and get our body into a healthy state, and happy state where it starts to get on a rhythm. Okay, so these things are silent stressors that we went over today. Don't let stress be the silent killer in your life. That's episode 90 of the School of Shred, the one and only, the health and fitness show here, the holistic health and fitness show. Shred your old and make better your new, folks. Stay strong and healthy in body. Stay relentless and energized in spirit. And stay determined in your pursuits today. Go ahead and throw me a flex emoji, a little bit of fire. And de-stress your life today. And we will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. for episode 91 of the School of Shred. Until next time, school, class is dismissed. Go de-stress your day.